back to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World, our conference 2022. We are joined this morning by David Teten, founder and partner of Versatile Venture Capital. And David's going to speak to us this morning about the next great entrepreneurial opportunity, how to identify market white space. David, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to your presentation. Let me hand it off to you. So if you're ready to go, we'll jump in.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. So what I'm going to talk about is how to figure out what business to build. One of the great ironies of the venture capital universe is venture capitalists have a diverse portfolio of companies that they can invest in. And what do they do with that? They typically look at about 100 companies before they invest in one company. You can see that from the data here. The typical portfolio, the aperture of what a guy like me looks at is huge, and then I filter down just one or two companies. But let's say you're a founder and you're thinking, what company do I start? So most founders I speak with, they've considered 3 ideas, 4 ideas, 5 ideas, and then they pick one. And the mistake they're making is they don't have a diversified portfolio, right? They have all the risk of a startup all tied up in one company, but usually they're not judicious enough about deciding what startup they should pursue. So I'm going to give in a half hour an overview of how to think about how to filter all the ideas that are buzzing around you to filter for the one that might be worth devoting the next 10 years of your life to. No need to take notes. You can see this full and extended version of this deck and some additional notes on my website at teten.com/mr, and also LEW will make it available afterward. A little bit about my background. I've been a VC for a decade as a partner at 2 different VC firms in New York, and now the founder of Versatile Venture Capital. And prior to that, I was an investment banker, strategy consultant, and serial fintech entrepreneur, and also founder of Harvard Business School Angels, which is the biggest angel group on the East Coast. So this is based on my experience on both sides of the table. So I'm going to talk about some of the process, some tools to filter through startup ideas, some signals that indicate that a company is worth pursuing, and about your network of business ideas. So what I've listed on this slide is the process of searching for a startup idea. There's a lot written online about how to judge startup ideas, and I'm not going to focus too much on that. What I'm going to focus on is how do you brainstorm ideas and then research them. And then if you want to talk more about execution, I have more research on my website, or you can go to leanstartup.com and the variety of other resources that get to that point. But I want to focus on something that I think is undercovered in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So let's start with research. And my focus here is cheap tools. By definition, right, for today's conversation, you're an unfunded entrepreneur. You hopefully have a day job, right? You don't have a lot of money. So I'm going to talk about how to get through a lot of startup ideas for free to filter for the ones that are worth devoting your energy to. So there are 4 major ways that you can look for a startup idea. One is you start with the data, right? So you might see that, for example, there is an increase in consumption of work from home technologies, right, because of COVID. Or you can start with an idea. You say, gee, wouldn't it be awesome if I had some better video conferencing tools? And then you start trying to build it and research it. So both of those are valid techniques. The first tends to come more from the consulting and investment banking universe, where people have access to more data, other sort of analytic professions. The second tends to come from people with more of a product background. One basic tool is market mapping. So a market map here is a outline of the major competitors, and you try and look for the holes. So here is a crude market map from around 2005. At the time, LinkedIn was taking early leadership. Facebook was becoming a success in the US. But in Europe, there wasn't really a Facebook equivalent. So some German entrepreneurs started a clone of Facebook, which was very much a clone, right? Same design, same approach, everything. And they sold it for about 100 mil within a year, right? So that was a perfect example of seeing a hole in the market and saying it works in other countries, let's try and do it here in Europe. So some other ways of thinking about the axes of the market are quality, right? Sometimes there's room for a high quality and a low quality product with price varying concomitantly, and distribution channel. Another one is figuring out the different customer segments. So for example, in that prior market map, I broke it into how you socialize for relationships, meaning dating, for networking and just general friendship, and then for business. And those have grown into quite different segments of the social network ecosystem. So number one tool most people use is they go online, they go into Bing, Google. So most people, though, underuse the tools that Google offers for free. So if you want more depth in your research, I would append, let's say you're looking up video conferencing technologies, append file type :PDF, file type :PPT. And you will get typically much more in-depth analyses of the topic that you're searching for. You can also look in books.google.com and you will pull up more in-depth analyses. You're not getting the sort of surface level stuff that tends to clutter the search engine results nowadays as Google becomes less usable, some would argue, than in the past. There are also major research databases. If you want to access these for free, maybe you're a student, maybe you have a child or a friend who's a student. These are typically offered free to current students. You can get a lot of Wall Street research for free with Charles Schwab account or some of the other major online brokers. And also at your local public library, this is a good way to look for other coverage people have done of the sector that you're targeting. There are also some online document repositories where you can look for industry analyses that might identify market white spaces, like SlideShare and Scribd and archive.org if you want to look at the history. A common mistake I see is founders come and they say, we've got this idea and there are a couple of competitors, but they seem to have died. So I'll say, why did they die, right? They're presumably roughly as competent as you are. So they tried and they failed. Why do you think you're going to be different? So the correct answer is, I've done my research. I spoke with people who worked at those companies. I've recruited some of them as advisors, and these are the mistakes they made, and here's what we're doing differently. The wrong answer is, I don't know, I haven't researched it, right? If you're going to invest 10 years of your life in a startup idea, you should do some research on what other people have done in that general vicinity. So I recommend setting up some basic tools to track your competitors, even when you don't exist yet, right? You do have competitors. I will add, by the way, that the number one competitor for most startups is not a company per se, it's inertia. You don't solve a real problem. But the way I think about competitors, these are other people who are trying to run the same sort of experiment you are, trying to find a solution that will hit product market fit. And they are parallel experiments too. Any scientist knows you look at the prior art before you launch a new study. So you should look at the prior art of what other people who look sort of like you are doing in addressing the market you're addressing to see how they've approached it. I'd also recommend looking for building some resources around you to dig deeper in the market. At our website, we list a whole set of free consulting services offered by different graduate schools, major business schools around the world. So if you reach out and say, I've got the startup idea, hopefully you have some relevant credentials. Once I'm funded, I'm going to be hiring. Can you please help me write my business plan? You can often get a team of students to work for you for free. So I definitely recommend doing that. So you may also want to woo some interns, which overlaps with the student research teams. So how do you get interns to work for you for a modest price? So you want to highlight prestige factor, right? Hopefully although your company by definition is no prestige because you're a startup, but hopefully you have work experience at a reputable company. And I would be proactive about opening doors, right? Introduce them to worthwhile events, introduce them to potential other mentors and advisors, right? You're building a relationship here with someone who will hopefully be an employee of your future company. In any case, it's going to be a lifelong relationship. Several of the venture partners who work at our firm are past interns of mine, right? And this is from 10 years ago, but it shows you how these relationships are important over time. You also want to provide education. So if you're an expert in product management, say, I'm going to mentor you in product management as you help me refine the wireframes for this product. I'm going to give you bullets on your resume. And one strategy that's worked very well for me is I recruit interns who are in a club. So instead of listing on the general job board at a university, hey, I'm looking for an intern, you're competing with Google, right? That's very difficult. So I'll send an email to say the debate club or the theater club saying, I'm looking for people who have experience with debate, or looking for people with experience in theater, because debate is relevant to competitive research, theater is relevant to presentations, and almost no one does that, right? So you're more likely to get a positive response from students who are a priori qualified for the skill sets you're looking for. Whatever skill you need, there's probably a club, right? You've got different language clubs, and you've got, of course, the high-tech club, and so on. So another basic tactic is polling. Run some free polls, meaning just reach out to some initial people who've indicated that they have interest in you. And I've listed here a couple of tools that will allow you to run basic polls. So what are signals, right? hard signs, green flags that say, go faster. This is a great idea. So when customers say, I want this, I got to have this, that's the best signal. Ideally, you're the customer. You know this use case from your past life, but it's fine if you're not, as long as you are close to customers, say, yes, this matters. So you can look at customers in focus groups, do in-depth interviews. I'd always recommend snowball sampling. That means whenever you speak with a potential customer, ask them, who else do you know who might have an interest in what we're building? And that will help you find the early potential users. Another tactic is go onto Quora and look for questions, right? Type in, I'm looking for a tool to give me better video conferencing with better quality, and see what other people have recommended. So here's an example. Someone typed in, what's the cheapest way to send money to China? And someone answered and said, this was exactly the problem I had, and that person started TransferWise. I've listed here some of the Chinese equivalents of Quora. Another is to analyze search engine traffic. You can do a rough TAM analysis based on the volume of searches that people are doing in search terms relevant to the problem that you're addressing. I'd also suggest using some of the social media monitoring tools like Exploding Topics. So if you look at this graph, there's been a spike in traffic on beauty fridge. I didn't know this was a thing until my teenage daughter told me, but apparently it's a thing to buy a separate fridge just for your makeup. I did not buy that for my daughter because I said that's ridiculous, but clearly there are a lot of people who are buying that for themselves or for their family members. So another pattern that I see in terms of interesting startup ideas is people unbundling established tools that are second best for the purpose. So here's a screenshot of Craigslist, right? A site that hasn't been meaningfully updated for a couple decades. And every section of Craigslist, someone's built a startup that does it better. Craigslist, by the way, is still a great business, ludicrously profitable, but the folks at Indeed and Reddit and so on, they've also built substantive businesses by realizing that if there are people, millions of people using Craigslist for a certain use case, if you do it in a focused way, you'll have a good business. I also look for kludges. So if a lot of people say, I've hacked together a solution using Zapier or IFT, or you look for a category in Craigslist where people say, here's my solution, right, for a certain problem, then that's a sign that people need a elegant baked solution, right? I remember back years ago, there was this business on Craigslist where people take all your CDs and rip them, meaning they would convert them into digital formats so you could get rid of your physical CDs. And that was for a while a valid business. And of course, it got replaced with a more efficient solution, which is called streaming. So I recommend throw up a launch page as soon as possible and start collecting emails. The launch page at a minimum can say, hey, sign up here to learn more about a product when we go live. An even better launch page is say, give us your credit card. We're not going to charge you yet, but we give priority to people who give us their credit card. And that's validation, right? I, as a VC, if you can say, I have thousands of people giving me their credit card number because they're so eager for my product that at the moment is a splash page, you've hit a nerve, right? You have identified a market need that is not addressed. Cash is the best market signal. I'm an investor in Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding platform. And one of the companies that raised money on the site is Interaxon, which makes a brain sensing headset. So Interaxon made a nice video that said, we have never built it, but we want to build a headset that will sense your brainwaves. You can use it for ADHD, PTSD. And they got $287,000 from people who gave them the money with no recourse, meaning they weren't getting equity. They weren't getting any real commitment other than we're going to try really hard to build this product that no one has ever built before. So they actually ended up building the product. And in my old firm, we invested in Interaxon because in part, we said this is validation, right? People really want to have a product that will help them meditate better, sleep better, because they're willing to pay money for something that doesn't even exist today. Another pattern to look for is who's getting VC funding, right? That's a sign that certainly the VCs think it's worth studying, but I'd be a little careful about it because I get nervous when I see 30 funded competitors going after the exact same market. Who's to say I'm going to pick the best of 30? The ideal is there are 1 or 2 competitors. So you're still early in the VC cycle, and hopefully you've got a better team than the other few competitors, and then you're going to beat them. Another tactic is to talk with the VCs who, by definition, are always in touch with what are the emerging markets about unmet needs. On my website, I list for free a group of startup ideas that we think the market needs, right? I've done preliminary investigation. I think there's a real business there. I give this away for free. I don't even require that you give me your email. So why do I do that? Because ideas are worth zero. No one's willing to pay me anything for this awesome list of ideas. What matters is execution. And if you execute one of these ideas, call me or email me, and I may be able to fund you. So another pattern in identifying startup ideas is building out a network of informants, of people who are knowledgeable about the space, who will give you insight into what the problem is and how to solve it. So the reason for this is when you're building new business, there's usually not a textbook that you can buy, right? They're at best, someone's published a PDF with an overview of the landscape. So the information about these new markets, new technologies is usually verbal, or it's in chat rooms, right? It's not in the public library in a convenient format. So you have to go find the people who have the data. Social media is great for that because it allows you to convert cold calls to warm calls, to find the right person who have insight into the business that you aspire to build. I've listed here a formula that I developed for articulating the value of your information network. So we're not going to go in the math of it, but briefly, there's 7 main components of your social network, your information network. And there are ways to use technology to more efficiently zoom in on the right person who will give you insight into your particular business idea. And we're going to briefly go through each of these components of your network. So the first is you want to find information about the people of greatest competence about the topic that you're studying. So LinkedIn is a great tool for that. I would also highlight ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is very helpful for identifying people who are not on LinkedIn because they're too senior. Certain professions like doctors are often not on LinkedIn. So you can use a tool like Sermo, that's an online community for doctors, or ZoomInfo to pull out their bios. ZoomInfo is a little scary because what it does is it aggregates all of the publicly available data about you from your alumni newsletter, from a newspaper story, from your website, and synthesizes into one bio. It's very good for identifying affinities. So if you think you're studying something where you want to get intel, you don't have a budget to pay an expert network, so you can go on and look for people who went to your university, right, or immigrated from the country that you're from, and those people are more likely to be responsive because you have some affinity. You can also look for people who have been there. I talked earlier about ex-employees. A great source are customers who've done a vendor analysis, people who are very thorough about it. So IT Central Station, for example, is a website for people in the IT space who are assessing different software vendors. I'm an investor in Experity.com, which is an expert network. You can go on and say, I'm looking for someone who's in France and has expertise in this space, whatever your niche requirements are, and they'll help you find such a person. Another great tactic to increase the number of people in your network is to organize events targeted to your audience. So you're investigating work from home technologies, go to your local alumni club and say, I want to organize an event focused on this space of work from home technologies or future of work, and I want to bring in a couple of prominent speakers who are knowledgeable about this. Your university alumni club will say, great, right? They're always looking for events. They want more attendees. They have a great mailing list, right? Probably a better mailing list than you do. And the advantage of that is you spend 4 hours organizing the event and you'll get 100 people in a room who are interested in your niche topic. That is a more efficient use of your time than having one-on-one meetings with some people, right? 100 people, that's going to take you about 200 hours to meet with all those people. So this is a very effective strategy. Then how do you get people to actually give you information? Paying them with a tool like Experity certainly works, but that's not the only tool and you're on a budget. So a couple of tactics. So lead with the radio station everyone listens to, WIIFM, what's in it for me? So when you say, I'm building a startup company and we're going to be looking for advisors and investors and employees, right? A reasonably intelligent person will say, oh, gee, maybe there's room for me to be involved. Indicate common affinity, right? You came from the same country, you went to the same university, doesn't matter, right? Anything that is a point of common interest will help you get more response from that person. Share information. Say, I'm doing in-depth research about this space. I'm happy to share with you what you learned. That's a quid pro quo. Another is to leverage others' credibility. When you say, Dr. Smith referred me to you, right? Dr. Smith is a senior person. The fact that you're talking with her indicates something about the quality of people you're engaging with. That makes you more credible. And it's very effective when you say, I heard you are the person I've got to speak with. You're the domain expert in this space. People certainly appreciate that. So it's always better to meet people face to face. You know, all of us, including the CEO of Zoom, have said they have a little Zoom fatigue. So a good tool for meeting people face to face is something like meetup.com. Go on and look for example, I've listed here the fintech meetup group if you're building fintech startup. But if the meetup group doesn't exist for what you're interested in, go create it, right? Go create the work from home or future of work startups group and see who signs up. Those people are by definition interested in what you're doing. So another component of your network is information, right? Doesn't matter who you know if you don't have a way of following up with them, right? Got to get their email, phone number, etc. So I've listed here some of the basic CRM systems. One of my standard interview questions when I interview people for a sales job or any sort of outward-facing job is, what's your CRM? The wrong answer is my phone or Excel. The good answer is I use a real CRM, right? Whatever it is, I've listed here some major vendors. I use HubSpot, but it doesn't matter. And I am diligent about putting in the data. If you want to be a co-founder of a startup and you want to be outward facing, right? You're not going to be the back office person or the pure technology developer. And even technology developers nowadays have to be somewhat outward facing, right? You need to keep track of the people that you're meeting and do it systematically. It certainly applies to VCs as well as you go through potentially a future fundraise process. Another efficient way to increase the number of people in your network is join the right gated communities where people in your ecosystem are. So for example, CERMO is an online community for doctors. The Executive Forum in IERG are focused on senior executives, particularly people in transition or seeking board seats. China COT is for China-based executives. And then there are the broader generic platforms like LinkedIn. So that's another way to pull up people who you should be talking to. You can do the same thing with investors. I've listed here some of the major online communities for different types of investors. And these are also a source of information if you talk with the investors interested in your ecosystem. Last component of your social network is diversity. And this sounds like a sort of political concept, but it's not. It's actually backed up by the social network analysis in this space. People who get more done have more diverse networks. A classic pure example is, let's say you're bilingual, bicultural, Chinese, English, right? So you are more positioned than I am to do import-export from China, to look at Chinese business models and bring them to the US or vice versa, right? And a lot of people with those skill set, they get jobs or build businesses that bridge between those cultures. So how can you do that, especially if you don't have the fortune of growing up with a second language or second culture? So think about who's logically adjacent to you, right? So you're building work from home technology. Who's adjacent to you? Well, the whole industry of internal video conferencing, right? So back in the pre-COVID days, some big companies would have video conferencing rooms that were quite expensive, right? Where you had to physically go and sit, and then there'd be someone in Shanghai who'd be engaging with you from that office. So that's not affordable for everyone to have a super fancy, super high resolution screen from your home, but maybe there are ways you can take some of that technology and bring it down market for the typical work from home person who has a much smaller budget. You look at geography. So you're building a logistics company in the US. Well, what's going on in Europe? What's going on in China? The old model of the Sandler brothers, for example, was take US business models and copy them into Europe, but that's not the only approach nowadays. If you look at Facebook, now Meta, right? So a good chunk of what they're doing is copying what's going on in China and South Korea and bringing it to the US. So I'd certainly be studying these adjacent markets, what's happening there in your industry, and what can you do and apply it to your market. So as next steps, I've put in links here to some other tools, some ideation frameworks, and a checklist for pitching VCs on my website, teten.com/pitch, which should help you dig into this further. I've also listed here some books that will hopefully be helpful to you. I just came out with my second book, which is called To University and Beyond, which is around early career education. And that will give you a lot of other ideas around how you can take advantage of your research time to identify the right business, the right opportunity for you to pursue and hopefully devote many years of your life to because you're building something major. So I've listed here my corporate and personal website. Feel free to ping me if you have further questions. And as I said, you can get this entire slide deck on my website. Any questions?
All right, David, thank you. Tremendous. Hey, thanks for as a father of 3 daughters, thanks for holding the line.
No problem.
on the makeup question, that was a good one. I appreciate that for sure. Hey, couple of quick observations. 2 things. Thanks for remembering public libraries to our audience. I think that's often an untapped resource people sometimes forget about, some of the basic blocking and tackling that you learned probably early on. And the student consulting is a tremendous idea. A lot of universities have those types of extracurricular clubs. Sometimes it's embedded into a course itself, and you've got some really talented students out there. I've done some of that here on Long Island with our LIU IQ student consulting network, and the feedback we get from the entrepreneurs is always that they really like the way the students think. It gives them an opportunity to really be brought forward to oftentimes with technology and the like, for sure. But this was, what a great toolkit on just building the network, taking those connections back, and looking for help and really developing that white space and filling it in. I think this was tremendous for our audience. And thank you for sharing all the various resources and references that you had. I've used a number of your items. BoardX I have found very helpful in the work that I do, and certainly anytime you get a chance to speak at a conference, it's a home run from the exponential connectivity standpoint. So all great tips for our audience. We wish you the best of luck in the future. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in the future real soon. Okay.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take good care, David. Thank you very much. Be well.
You too. Bye.